Hey Jack, just wanted to take some time and give you some feedback on your resume that you sent over. Thanks a lot for sending this through. Bullets or areas for improvement that I can see at first glance, and I'll be comparing this with some of the other resumes that I've been taking a look at recently. First of all, I would say that the general gist of your resume is good. It's really strong. I love the layout. It's nice and functional. Areas that I would look to for improvement here, I'm gonna go from top to bottom. So in the first section, your header in general is great. I think one thing that could be really helpful is if you had a LinkedIn profile to your LinkedIn bio or to a portfolio if you have one. I know that you're looking at product management roles, but if you was in engineering, for example, I would ask as well that you would link to like your GitHub profile. But for product management, if there's anything that's an equivalent of that, then I would recommend, yeah, definitely have your LinkedIn bio in your header section for sure. The other thing that comes to mind as well is if you're applying for global jobs based on the wearedistributed platform, then it may be more relevant to just include your country and not include the personal information that you have on your resume. But if you are applying for roles just in the US, then of course you want to have your location in there as you have in most places, which is fine. But just for those cases where if you're applying for a job where the company is potentially located in Europe, and like some other companies are on the distributed platform, and they might not be familiar with your location, and they just want to make sure that you are indeed based in a country that they can hire from, or they just might be interested in what country you're based in. So I would just include the United States in your header on that front. The next thing that comes to mind for me is there is actually in your header, so one thing that's missing is the role that you're going for next. So I know you've done product management multiple times before in previous roles, but as a recruiter or hiring manager, I don't know what role you're looking for next. Obviously, it's going to be in product management, but to what degree? Are you looking for a senior PM role, a lead PM role, a principal PM role, or to lead and manage a team, which you have done before anyway, and to be at like a director level, director, senior director, so to speak. So I would say it's really important to you to use that for two reasons. The first reason is just so it's visible to the hiring manager or to a recruiter. But if you're looking specifically for applying at senior product manager roles or lead product manager roles, you can then they can easily see that on your resume. The second thing is that in ATS platforms, they work akin to like a filing cabinet. So if I type in product manager in the tool, all the resumes that contain either lead product manager or whichever role I'm looking for will show up first. And so you need to almost approach your resume like the way that a marketer would do SEO for a blog post. You need to make sure that everything that you want a recruiter to find and know about you. And so when they're looking for specific phrases or skills, you need to make sure that those are included. But that's one of the main reasons for it. The other thing that I see missing here too is like an executive summary, or like a career summary or executive summary, which one or two lines that explains exactly what you're looking for and what you're good at. So something that sums up all of your experience in terms of the kinds of organizations that you work with, the impact that you've had, and what you specialize in, because you want to set yourself out to be different from your regular product manager. For example, if you're a product manager that focuses mainly on growth related initiatives and experimentation, then it's important for that to be highlighted in your executive summary, your professional profile. The same goes for if you're working in like product operations or integrations, then you would want that to also be clear too. And the whole purpose of this is just to make it easier for the hiring manager and the recruiter to make a positive decision on your application and on your resume. So I would definitely recommend having that. I'm just going to pull up a resume here, see if this will be of any help. So I have this summary section here, which basically explains like how many times I've done product marketing, as that's what I've been trained in, and what I specialize in as well. So go-to-market strategy, specifically at PLG and enterprise sales-led organizations. So I would use this summary when I am applying for jobs that I know enterprises or sell to mid-market and enterprise clients. That's definitely something that I would recommend. So just having that section, the way to write these out is you need to think of it much like an elevator pitch. Within 30 seconds, what would you want someone to know about you? Within 30 seconds, and I would recommend to include that cut there. Let me see what else comes to mind. Just go through. Okay, one moment. Right, next thing that comes to mind for me is for each of the companies that you've worked at, one thing that I'm curious about is, first glance, I'm not exactly sure, or I am, but just for the unaware recruiter, I wouldn't be sure as to what type of companies you worked at unless I knew the name. And the chances of an average recruiter or hiring manager knowing the name of these organizations is really low, unless it's a worldwide brand. And so therefore, I would say to the name of the company, you should include the type of organization they are. So for example, type of company are they? Is it a SaaS company? Is it an agency? I can tell by looking at the language here, is that it seems like it's some kind of, is it a SaaS? I might be wrong, but the language in here is very SaaS-like. Or maybe this is more to do with like mergers and acquisitions or something to that effect. But yeah, at first glance, as a recruiter, I'd be curious to know, what type of organization. And this is really helpful for a few reasons. But the most important reason is so that when you're applying for a job and that job says you must have SaaS experience, you must have recent experience working at a SaaS company, your resume would make it much easier for a hiring manager to make a positive decision on you if they can see that you have indeed worked at a software company. So you could just include the type of category that it's even in. Whilst I would advise to also say SaaS, but I think it's probably more valuable to say the kind of organization that it is, or what category they work in. And because, if I was to type some over into G2, for example, if it is a software company, and I could see some of the competitors, and I'd be like, this is definitely a software company. But for the average recruiter who doesn't have much time reviewing resumes, it would just be helpful for each of these to mention the type of organization that they are on that front. Let's see now. Okay, you've got dates in, and I assume that this is reverse chronological. Okay, great. Reverse chronological order, as it should be. And so dates, you've got locations, you've got titles in there. So yeah, just the other thing I would add is, as I said, the type of organization that they're in. Going through the bullet points, I think the bullet points are impressive, especially your most recent stuff. I like that there's a lot of numbers in here. And I guess the only query that I would have is where you said that you orchestrated the implementation of a SaaS tool. I'd be curious as a recruiter, what type of SaaS tool was this? And I'm also curious as to like how these things were measured too. So when we say increase output by 100%, I'm thinking, what was it that was increased by 100%? Something to do with the templates that were created, I believe. But so this is an area where, whilst adding in numbers is great, without the full context to understand the why behind those numbers and or what led to that output, it can get a bit confusing. The other thing that I would probably like to mention as well is it would be good to illustrate how do these numbers compare in general. So for example, if there's been, for example, a 15% decrease in time to market for credit runs and contract generation, if a recruiter does not know whether this is good or not, I'd be curious as to how you would be able to explain that. Maybe it's a question for interview, but also something that could potentially be answered on the resume. 15% good, what was the number before? Because it's one thing saying, okay, there's a 15% decrease in time to market, but now I'm curious, what was your time to market before? And what was your time to market now? So if I was having percentages are great, it would also be handy to include absolute numbers too, like you've done here, which I think is brilliant. When it comes to the order in which you mentioned the achievements, I would highly recommend that you reorder them and have the most impactful achievements first, and then the least impactful ones. And that's only just to save time for the recruiters or hiring managers' perspective. Because if they can see almost impactful stuff early on, you want the end goal is to get them to say yes as soon as possible. So I'd highly recommend doing that. The other thing that comes to mind as well is the one thing that I've noticed that could be helpful just from a readability perspective is to bold some of the big wins that you've had. So for example, this is huge. So you should definitely bold that one. This one is huge, that one. So the ones that are like really, really impactful and really important, I would highly recommend that you bold those. Not to do with a discoverability or an HS reason. It's mainly to draw attention to the fact that those things, they are huge drivers. And it's a testament to the work that you've been doing in your career. And the same would apply to the rest of them as well on that front. Through the rest of your resume, it looks very strong. The other thing so I was going to just mention about skills, right? So you haven't mentioned some software skills some software that you use, plus some skills that you do have. The other thing that I would probably be curious about is if you could add other relevant product management skills that you use. And I would almost put your skills and certification even higher than your education, just because of how impactful those things are. There is one thing that I do tend to recommend to people, which I have been doing for just a few people that have been seeing results from this, is by mentioning a skill but backing it up with a real life example. So here in my resume, I mentioned like some of the different tools that I've used in the past. And so in fact, this is actually a good example of where I can even improve this, is I mentioned here deep understanding of go-to-market and sales processes. But what I should actually do here is to show an example of that. So go-to-market strategy should be the skill. And then I should show a qualifying statement, a statement that qualifies me to have the right to mention and list that particular skill. So that's one thing that can be done. One of the other things that I like doing too is, let's see, do I have it here? Okay, so it's not on this resume, it must be on a different resume. Let me see if I can find another one. One of the other things that I do like having, just to give your resume a little bit more depth, is to add in, or at least consider adding in, some career highlights, especially for your skills. Well, we've got career highlights are like your top 3 big achievements that you've done in life and then in your career. And then the other area that I tend to help people with as well is when it comes to the actual skills themselves, we try to quantify those skills whilst we list them. So in this case, this person, the main skill here is that they do P&L analysis and profit modeling. So we back that up by talking about how many years they've done that, what's the size of the portfolios they've managed, and the impact of that work. And we put that on the side as well, which is really helpful. And so as you can see in this person's resume, I've included things like the bolding here. This has led to a number of interviews for this particular candidate. So yeah, just wanted to mention that as it's something that could be relevant to you on that front. As it stands, other than that, I think that's probably everything off the top of my head. The only other thing that I think could also be added here is for you to include a little bit about you, just to add some color and personality to your life, to your resume. Sorry, I'm sure there is a lot of color and personality to life, but adding it onto your resume is definitely something that I would recommend. And for example, in my resume, I mentioned like a number of facts that I have and some of my hobbies and interests. I just must to add color to it, and it makes a great starting points interview. So then people can bring up and ask me questions about those things, and then I can then reply to them much easier compared to if they were just asking me more technical questions. So yeah, sorry, this was only meant to be a 10-minute review. I went up and almost double that time, but I hope that this is helpful and useful. And let me know if you need any extra help. And yeah, I hope this helps. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.